U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to attack Iran again in the coming hours and days. Speaking to U.S. media, he says the U.S. military is going to hit Iran hard on Monday and Tuesday. He added that the memorandum of understanding with Tehran was a test which Iran failed to honor. The U.S. Navy says a naval blockade on Iranian ports will come into force on Tuesday at 2000 GMT. The military says it'll be enforced for all vessels, regardless of flag. It adds that ships suspected of passing without authorization will be subject to interception, diversion, and capture. The Navy says neutral transit through the strait to and from non-Iranian destinations will not be impeded. Let's go to Mike Hanna now, who's live for us at the White House in Washington, D.C. Mike, Donald Trump has delivered new threats to Iran tonight. What's he been saying?
Well, he's been giving an interview to a local radio station in which he was speaking fire and brimstone, essentially renewed threats to Iran, as you say. He said during the interview, we are going to hit them very hard tonight and we're going to hit them hard tomorrow. And there's not a damn thing they can do about it, he continues. They have nothing going on other than that they have big mouths. Those are the words, I must stress, of the President of the United States. So threats from President Trump. Earlier in the day, he announced that the U.S. was resuming its naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, upping the ante, as it were. In his recent interview as well, he also made mention of a fourth nuclear site that the U.S. may strike. So it does appear that his proposed new phase of military operations is further than what has been happening in recent days, which is essentially targets associated with the Iranian action in the Strait of Hormuz. It appears that he's pushing further inland should he make true his threats of these strikes, including that nuclear power plant position.
Mike, apart from that blockade being reimposed, Donald Trump has also said that he's going to charge ships 20% for passing through the Strait of Hormuz. But Marco Rubio, he stated last month that when he was visiting the Gulf, that no country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. Well, that's existing international law, according to Marco Rubio. So it would appear now that Donald Trump is actually going against that with those charges of 20% tolls. What's Trump's argument here for why he thinks that he's able to do this, but Iran is not?
Well, he says that the U.S. deserves it because it is taking the risk. It is also expending its military might and spending money on that. But you are quite right. The Secretary of State was very clear that charging tolls on international routes of passage is against international law. We must also point out that, of course, the idea that Iran charged tolls for passage through the Strait of Hormuz has been rigorously denied and rejected by the United States, and yet here you have as well the president saying there's going to be a 20% toll charge. Now, he's speaking about the southern route, which is along the coast of Oman. We have yet to hear about what the Omani authorities think about tolls being charged on a waterway, part of which is in their territorial waters. I must add as well that the Joint Maritime Commission, which is an umbrella body which basically controls traffic through the strait, announced earlier in the day that passage along that southern route is open, two-way traffic, and it specifies no tolls are being charged or will be charged. So he's only going against his own Secretary of State, he's also going against the Joint Maritime Authority, which is very specifically saying that tolls cannot and will not be charged on that route.
Yeah, and I think the words in his post on Truth Social was that the USA is now going to be the new guardian of the Strait of Hormuz, which kind of sounds like a movie title recently. But Mike, what's the Pentagon now been saying about the new blockade coming into force in less than 24 hours? How are they going to do that?
Indeed, yes. Well, it has said that that blockade is coming into effect in the course of tomorrow afternoon, U.S. time. That will be likely to be very similar to the one that was exercised before, in which it was mainly naval resources that were used to prevent vessels from passing through that northern route, which is the route over which Iran is seeking and says it has control. It is there, says the Pentagon, to prevent the movement of Iranian vessels and vessels connected to Iranian interests, not other vessels who will be allowed to pass through freely. It does not make clear whether all vessels must use the southern route, which the U.S. is claiming to protect. But there again, the Iranians have insisted that any vessels that go through the northern route without clearing it, they will come under attack. So here we have a scenario where, once again, the strait is a matter of deep controversy between these nations.
Indeed. Mike Hanna, live for us at the White House. Thank you so much, Mike. Now, Iran says the U.S. has violated the Memorandum of Understanding with the recent strikes and its operations in the Strait of Hormuz. Mahmoud Abdelwahed has more from the Iranian capital, Tehran.
Iran has been hardening its rhetoric recently following the U.S. move in the Strait of Hormuz. Both the Joint Operation Headquarters of the Armed Forces and the Revolutionary Guard in Iran have issued statements simultaneously, accusing the United States of endangering safe passage and international trade through the Strait of Hormuz, and in fact threatening to take decisive action or response against the United States if it takes any other route other than that designated by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, these developments come following the latest spate of attacks, the airstrikes carried by the United States overnight and through this morning, and targeted several locations in central and southern Iran, and killing and injuring several people, including civilians. Now, the Revolutionary Guard has responded by expanding its retaliatory operations targeting U.S. Military assets in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Oman. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry has accused the United States of violating the UN Charter and also violating the Memorandum of Understanding. It says that the Memorandum of Understanding is now at a crisis stage, accusing the United States of violating Article number 1 pertaining to the ceasefire, Article number 5 pertaining to the management of the Strait of Hormuz, and Article number 10 pertaining to the waiver allowing Iran to export its oil. Now, as the United States seem to be trying to put pressure on Iran to degrade its military capabilities in and around the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is responding by expanding its retaliatory operations beyond the region. The Strait of Hormuz now remains the focus, the center of the conflict, while the diplomatic framework has been weakening but has not completely collapsed. Mahmoud Abdelwahed, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
Let's bring in Jason Campbell now. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Jason, so this U.S. naval blockade comes back now into force in less than 24 hours. But Iran says they're not giving up their authority and control of the strait. Now, even though no one wants a new full-scale war, how big is the risk here at this point, even from a miscalculation or a mistake from either side?
Thank you, Per. Yes, I think what we've seen now in these last couple of weeks with some of the tit-for-tat attacks being carried out by both sides, and now the reconstitution of the naval blockade, or the threatened reconstitution of it tomorrow, is that you're seeing this trend of militarization of the strait continue to rise. And when you do that, even though I believe both sides are reluctant to engage once again in full-scale war, the likes of which we saw early on in the conflict, I think right now you have a heightened risk that one side will miscalculate the actions of the other, and or a mistake will be made such that escalation is inevitable. So I think right now the Iran, the Strait, and the entire region, I think, are going to be under heightened risk as long as this trend continues upwards.
Jason, Marco Rubio, he said earlier that there isn't a nation on earth that supports having to pay money to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So is Trump right now in claiming this new title, Guardian of the Strait, offering U.S. protection for a 20% fee?
Yeah, it's difficult to see the degree to which this plan has been fully thought out. I think right now it seems to me pretty far-fetched that the U.S. would be successful in implementing such a toll system, or that the requisite support in Congress would be provided to do this in the long term. And I think the economic impact of this on the international economy would be pretty substantial if it were to be carried out. So, look, we've heard the president use strong rhetoric a number of times over the last few weeks. We've seen him on 2 occasions threaten to destroy Iranian society. This might fall under, again, that more polemic talk, but I don't see this in reality being something implemented in the near term.
As we're talking, there's just been a tweet or a post on X from U.S. Central Command. I'm just going to read it to you here briefly, Jason. At 4:45 p.m. Eastern today, U.S. Central Command began launching the 3rd consecutive night of strikes against Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction. These strikes will continue imposing a heavy cost on Iranian forces and degrade their ability to attack innocent civilians and commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. So now we have confirmation from U.S. Central Command that at 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time today, they began launching the 3rd consecutive night of strikes against Iran. Your reaction to that?
I mean, given what the president said earlier today, I'm not overly surprised by that announcement that they're formally stating that this is now underway and will continue to be so in the very near term. My big question here is, however, is whether or not this will really move the strategic needle in favor of Washington, given that Iran has already endured now months of heavy strikes and really views some purview over the Strait of Hormuz not as a bargaining chip, but as a vital component of its sovereignty. So I don't know that this is going to have the strategic impact that the White House is hoping for.
We know that the mediators, they've been working really hard now to keep this MOU alive and in place, but now we have confirmation of a 3rd consecutive night of U.S. strikes on Iran. Do you think the MOU is still alive?
I think that both sides see some utility in having the MOU still as the sort of cornerstone of this very incremental process. I think it gives each side license both to negotiate, but also to carry out some of this coercive diplomacy, as I've come to call it, in terms of these attacks. I don't know that it's going to fully dissipate and go away, but I think there's enough unknowns here that each side is going to continue to point to it as a way of accusing the other side of violating something and sustaining this unfortunate nebulous cycle we seem to be in right now.
Jason Campbell, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks, Per.
Now, the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen says its air defenses have dealt with ballistic missiles launched by the Ansar Allah Houthis. Well, that's after Yemen's internationally recognized government says its armed forces targeted the runway at Sana'a airport in an effort to prevent an Iranian plane from landing. The attack happened at the country's main airport in the capital. And what you're looking at is the moment the missiles struck that runway. A delegation from the Ansar Allah Houthi group was returning from Tehran after the funeral of Iran's supreme leader. They've now disembarked the plane at Al Hudaydah port. The Houthis have blamed Saudi Arabia for the attack on Sana'a airport, but there's been no confirmation of any Saudi involvement. Now, the Houthis, they have issued a statement off of the back of these latest strikes. It reads the following. In response to this criminal Saudi aggression, the Yemeni armed forces carried out a military operation targeting Abha International Airport with a number of ballistic missiles and drones. The Saudi enemy, with its reckless decision to unjustly attack Sana'a International Airport, bears full responsibility. Now, let's get more on this from Yusuf Mari, joining us live from Sana'a. Yusuf, what more do you know about these latest statements from both sides about what's been going on?
Well, from the statement, we know that the Ansar Allah Houthis are holding Saudi Arabia fully responsible for the attack. that took place on Sana'a International Airport earlier today, which of course forced the Iranian airliner to seek an alternative route and land in another airport in the province of Hodeidah. Just 5-6 hours later, we then witnessed the retaliatory attacks, which have been claimed by the Ansar Allah Houthis. According to the press statement, this is an attack that achieved its objectives. We know that according to Saudi military sources, the missiles and the drones that were launched from Yemen by the Ansar Allah Houthis were intercepted, and there's no reports of an accurate direct hit on the Abaha International Airport itself. But we also know from the statement that was issued earlier today by the Ansar Allah movement that these attacks are going to continue. In fact, the spokesperson for the Yemeni armed forces, he issued out a warning to all airliners, warning them not to fly over Saudi skies and to not to land or depart from any Saudi airports, which is an indication that more attacks are going to be headed towards Saudi airports and Saudi military installations, and of course Aramco oil facilities. This is according to Ansar Allah officials and military spokespersons who have indicated and have actually issued target zones and a list of targets that includes Saudi Aramco oil facilities, Aramco oil pipelines, and Saudi air bases, including civilian airports, as we've seen earlier today.
Yusuf, how is this going to escalate the situation now?
Well, the Ansar Allah, the Houthis have retaliated, even though Saudi Arabia has not claimed responsibility for the attack. In fact, the internationally recognized Yemeni government, they took full responsibility for the attack, stating that this attack on Sana'a International Airport was carried out by the Yemeni armed forces. The Ansar Allah Houthis, they simply just do not believe that this is the case, which is why they're directly targeting Saudi targets. This is going to escalate in a number of ways, one of which is going to lead to more military operations from Yemen towards Saudi Arabia and more Saudi military operations directed here in the capital Sana'a and in the areas controlled by the Ansar Allah Houthis. It's also going to escalate the situation if the Ansar Allah Houthis, they direct their attention and their military focus to Bab al-Mandab and the Red Sea. We know that they have mentioned and issued a number of threats threatening to close Bab al-Mandab and to prevent any U.S., Israeli, or Saudi cargo ships from accessing Bab al-Mandab. And of course, that's going to result into a worse economic situation across the entire region. So that's the card, the ace that the Ansar Allah Houthis are currently holding. It's Bab al-Mandab. And if the situation escalates, it could very well lead to the closure of this strategic waterway.
That's Al Jazeera's Yusuf Mari reporting live from Sana'a. Thank you so much, Yusuf. Now let's get some more on that statement from CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, stating that the U.S. has now begun a third consecutive night of strikes on Iran. Let's speak to Mike Hanna, who's live for us at the White House. Mike, what more do you know about what's going on right now, at least from what you're hearing from the Pentagon?
Well, CENTCOM issued that statement about half an hour ago saying that the strikes have been launched for the third successive night. That comment goes on to say that these strikes will continue imposing a heavy cost on Iranian forces and degrade their ability to attack innocent civilians and commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that last line there is important because CENTCOM is implying that these strikes, as they have been in recent days, are directed at those entities controlling access to the Strait of Hormuz, those Iranian entities doing so. However, just a short while ago, President Trump gave an interview to a radio station in which he said, yes, there would be more strikes against Iran tonight, which we are seeing now, and tomorrow they will continue. But he also said that it's being considered to strike at a nuclear site in Iran, another nuclear site. Now, the significance of this is where we're looking at CENTCOM talking about further degrading the Iranian ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. The president is talking about moving the conflict further inland into Iraq for the first time since the ceasefire was signed, striking at central mainland targets within Iran, should in fact President Trump follow through on that threat.
All right, we'll see how this all plays out. Mike Hanna, live for us at the White House. Thank you so much, Mike.